Hi, everyone. Thanks for staying. My name is Rebecca Kern. I'm a senior correspondent with the Capitol Forum, and I am the person who covers Congress for us. So it's been fun tracking the Netflix, now Paramount, Warner Brother deal as it's developed in D.C. And we have a really excellent panel to round out the day to talk about power gatekeepers in the movie industry. So I think it's going to be kind of a summary conversation of some of the things we've heard today, but maybe digging a little deeper in some issues and just generally talking about the impact of streaming on the movie industry. So we have Kim Masters, a partner at Puck News, and then David Dayen with the American Prospect, and then Jackie Brenneman, and she's with the Independent Film and TV Alliance. And then Daniel Ambar is with the California Department of Justice and the Antitrust Division. So, I think to start off, we've really seen a dramatic change in Hollywood over the last 10 years with the advent of streaming and consolidation, obviously, in the studio industry. And I just kind of wanted to go down the line and see how you've observed that kind of from your lens of maybe reporting and in the industry, at least David and Kim, and then from the independent film perspective, and Daniel, if you want to just, I know you can't speak to specific cases, but just the trend of consolidation in the space, I'm sure you're very closely tracking.
I've been covering this for a really long time, and this advent of the digital revolution was feared for many years. It's obviously come in and caused huge disruption in Hollywood. And we are also at this very strange moment where this consolidation going on, and somehow a young man who was born to one of the world's richest men could decide that he would like to run 2 film studios just because he felt like it, and not based on track record in particular. So this is a very weird and I think, honestly, depressing time and to be covering Hollywood.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a long time coming, as Kim said. I think what's interesting about it to me is that everyone sort of collectively decided that streaming was definitely and absolutely the future before they realized a business model for streaming. And now they're frantically trying to sort of reverse engineer that business model on the basis of making the service worse and more expensive. And that's really where we're at. And there are a ton of unresolved issues, starting with what is, at what point do we reach the tipping point where Cox and Charter say it's no longer worth it to fix the cable systems anymore, and we're just gonna wrap that up. What happens to linear television? What happens to broadcast television? What happens to local channels? What happens to news of any kind, which has not gained any foothold on streaming whatsoever? I think these issues have been really under-discussed as a function of where the puck is moving, not to borrow a term, but as to where we're going with the future of television. And it's a real morass, and it has not just sort of valence for entertainment, but valence for politics. Like our entire political system is kind of in large part dependent on ads in local television. Like, how is that going to be different? Is that going to be all narrowcast to individuals? There's a whole host of issues there, and they just haven't been even, I think, thought about very much at all.
So I I come first. I'm representing, the Independent Film and Television Alliance. I also spent over a decade on the movie theater side of the business, and very interesting years. And I certainly came in as an outsider and still feel like an outsider in an industry that is very generational, right? Lots of people in the studio system and the movie theater system are doing the same jobs that their grandpas did. Emphasis on the gender. So it's been very confusing to me to walk into this business and hear people describe things as facts that are clearly not fact-based at all. They are opinion disguised as fact, fear disguised as fact, tradition disguised as fact. And I see it all the time. And it's led to sloppy discussion. We've conflated the word consumer. We've conflated the meaning of screen. We don't understand what the business model is. I heard conversation about TikTok being competition. TikTok is attention harvesting. The consumer there is the advertisers who are paying. Movies or consumers are actually willing to pay, leave their homes, and they do want to do it. They've shown that time and time again that they want to see movies. Humans want to gather and watch stories with other humans. It is in our DNA. It's how we evolved. It is part of how our neurobiological makeup. And the fact that we are building business models around things that are anti-human is ridiculous. And we're seeing all kinds of horrible effects. We're seeing people not understanding truth. We're seeing people that do not have jobs, right? People that want to make things that do not have jobs. It is terrible for our economy. It's terrible for our soft power. And it's not what people want. If you had to pay 10 cents a tweet, like to watch any TikTok video, the entire model would crumble, because no one values that. That is not valued content. That is attention. So I think we need to first be really specific about what business we are talking about. Make sure that when we're talking about investing in this industry, we're investing in the part of the industry that consumers value. Understand how to assess value, right? I heard the residual conversation. How is Netflix valued? Well, Netflix is figuring out how to value things for their advertisers. They must have a per minute, per something value that can easily be shared. Profits can be shared in there, but the goal there is not to share in profits. And the same thing has happened for the theaters for many, many years. The goal was not to share revenues with the theaters. The theaters were thought of as the competitors to the studio somehow, even though these are people that have dedicated their families' fortunes to this business, built theaters, developed relationships with their communities, know their audiences, invested in screens, invested in recliners, in training staff, and they're thought of as a problem. And the goal was, if we can just skip sharing money with the theaters, then we'll make more money for ourselves. And it doesn't work. It is proven to not work. So for me, right now, I've never been more excited, because the movie industry, and we can talk about this, but the movie industry itself has been anti-competitive from the start. It is almost impossible to get an independent movie into a theater. And even more than that, it's almost impossible for it to succeed. You do not find out what theaters you're playing in until Monday for Friday. How do you market a movie under those conditions? But right now, for the first time in the entire history of the industry, it's not $2,000 to put a movie in a theater like it used to be for film, or during the digital transformation where the studio still paid for it at $2,000 a pop under a virtual print fee. It is $50 to put a movie on a screen. It can be done digitally and instantly. We know our audiences now more than ever. Markets where there's strong independent content, local content, are rebounding faster, making more money than they did pre-pandemic. And in international territories, they measure admissions. Admissions are up. If you sort movies on Box Office Mojo by location success, it's independent local titles. And those movies can compete because they don't have to be as expensive to make. They don't need a $30 million nationwide budget to market their movie. They can find their exact audiences, find the exact theaters, and partner. And this, because the studios have pulled out and the theaters have all these screens, there's actual leverage for the first time ever if we can work together and give audiences what they want. We can play around with pricing. There's all kinds of opportunity. But we have to all believe that gathering together and watching stories is actually important and worth investing in and working together to save. And I think there's a bunch of money to be made if we do that, and I think we'll all be a lot happier. And I took this job because I believe that, and I want to do whatever I can to help.
That's a positive to hear. Yeah, Daniel, do you want to talk about what you're observing in the trend of consolidation in the studio space and the dominance of streaming?
Sure. And let me just preface that I am here talking in my individual capacity and not on behalf of the office. But I have worked for over a decade in the antitrust space before my role here. And I think one thing is clear is that we have, as folks have mentioned already today, many examples of consolidation over the last decade. And I think it is important to look at the consequences of that and what has happened when evaluating these things. I think it's also true that this is a very dynamic space where we have seen changes, and some of those changes, as folks have noted, kind of take us back to where the movie theater was historically. I think that's an important observation.
Yeah, and I think something we heard about in the previous panel is the upending of the distribution system. And Jackie was referring to this, but if everyone else kind of wants to weigh in, how there is seeming to be more demand and interest, particularly in Gen Z's generation, to go to movies, but it seems to be harder and harder with consolidation in the studios and things going direct to streaming to get content distributed to films and to theaters, So can you talk about that challenge and the bottleneck there? If you want to weigh in, David or Jackie. Yeah.
Just briefly, I think we saw, I guess it's now 4 years ago, that there's no problem getting people not only out to movies, but really, really excited about them, if you give them something, perhaps 2 good original movies on the same day, with the case of Barbenheimer, something to really get excited about. The other thing I would say is that there's a real kind of, if everything is, when you have only a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The dominant theory of the industry is that, okay, we're going to respond to this threat from digital by consolidating and getting together. The reality is that nobody has had a better critical or financial year in recent memory in Hollywood than Warner Brothers. They're going to sweep the Oscars. They had 7 straight opening weekends of over $40 million for their movies. It's never been done before in history. And everyone should be asking the question, well, why is this company having to sell itself if it's doing so incredibly well? And the answer is they did a bunch of crappy mergers, and they accumulated a mountain of debt. And that's why they're in the position to then accumulate more debt, and somehow this is going to be the big resolution for them. So
it's only $79 billion.
I actually looked at equivalent deals in terms of leverage, and I could only find 2 in terms of this much debt relative to earnings. And the 2 are KKR's purchase of RJR Nabisco, which was the subject of the book Barbarians at the Gate, and the purchase of Toys R Us. And both of those led to massive, massive job loss. And they can only lead to massive, massive job loss. And the idea that there's going to be more output based on that is ridiculous. So, the point is that I think what Jackie said is absolutely right. People have the passion to go and have a communal experience in the theater, and it's been proven by the company that's now being sold off because they have a mountain of debt.
I would sort of throw in, I'm all for independent film, and I love independent film. We have independent filmmakers on my KCRW show all the time. But this machine of Hollywood is running on billion-dollar grossers. You cannot make Avatar as an indie. That cost hundreds of millions of dollars to make and market Avatar. And then the money that comes in.
I just made it on Sora just 2 days ago. Just made the whole thing.
And then the money that comes in, that's what keeps the theaters alive. They need more widely popular films, and that's why we've seen for years now sequels and reboots, because it's familiar IP, it breaks through the clutter, and they think that will get these people off their butts and into the theaters.
Well, actually, the interesting thing on that is that the major studios actually charge so much for their movies that on a per movie basis, that's not correct. The problem is you can't make an Avatar unless you have enough screens, right? Or unless you're going to start charging $200 a movie, right? So we have this push to premium, and consumers seem to understand the justification to see an Avatar and spend $35 on it, right? The problem we have is we have so many screens, which we need so that Avatar can work when we have 10 movies a year now or something that are taking up all the screens. But we have an 11% occupancy in North America in movie theaters. So we are not serving people with these big movies, and theaters aren't making the kind of money they need to make. So what we need is to justify the fact, we need to justify the screen count required to keep making movies. And what we don't have now, so the studios demand clean screens, which means that you are playing Moana at 10 p.m. so that Warner Brothers can't play Sinners at 10 p.m. They are not trying to actually compete with each other. They are trying to block competition. So you have studios doing clean screens. Studios are setting the prices via blended per caps. So there's no price differentiation. There is no way for, again, a smaller independent film to actually compete with price. And I know that would work because I used to run something called National Cinema Day. We did movies for $3 all day, all formats, all showtimes the first year, $4 the next year. The second year, we collected a lot of data. There's lots of public data, which is that movies that were independent made thousands of percent more dollars. More dollars, not more admissions, more dollars on a $4 movie ticket. We also asked people, did you see a movie today that you wouldn't have otherwise seen? And over 65% of the people said yes. And we asked why, and they said, oh, I would have just seen it on streaming. So we have a problem right now where the value proposition of independent film makes no sense to consumers because we are not competing. There is an anti-competitive landscape, and at the same time, the studios, while setting the price in the theaters, are also setting the price in the home and pushing movies to the home faster. And it is very confusing for people to understand and not feel like a sucker going to a movie. You feel like a sucker. So even though people are going to the movies, they're having to do all kinds of mental gymnastics to defend themselves. And ultimately, like, it's really, like, and then you've got like A-List and these subscription platforms. That's the real thing subsidizing independent film. Most people that are using those like going to see independent films aren't actually paying full price for it. Why is the market not adjusting to that? It would help independent filmmakers if they could do that.
Were you going to say something, Kim?
I'm just wondering, and I genuinely don't know right now, what is the top grossing independent movie of all times? And I'm sure there's an argument that's because those theaters don't
Lord of
play
the
them
Rings?
or whatever. Well, Lord of the Rings was Warner Brothers.
Is an independent film, though. Warner Brothers distributed it.
All right, well,
Those lines.
I mean, I think you're parsing it in a certain way, but we all know.
Well, what does
that.
independent mean? Because we're talking about the integrated studios, right? So if they're not financing it from start to finish, it's not their movie. Someone had to make that movie, and then it had a value, and it was decided. But,
Yeah, but if they're not in it, the movie doesn't happen.
Daniel and I are going to step out. So
I don't have to do anything.
I just would add that you know when I was talking about Warner Brothers before, that was that success has largely last year been built not on existing IP. It was built on Sinners, it was built on
so
Weapons.
extraordinary.
I think there is a real appetite in the marketplace for things that do step
aren't
outside
sequels,
that.
yeah.
Starting with Oppenheimer.
Iron Lung made $17 million on $4 million that an advertising budget. What does success mean? Does the highest grossing movie make money? How many of those movies are
It
really
depends on the budget.
right? So that's where are we measuring success in box office for the theaters, and for streaming, it's just how many views it had, minutes watched. Why are we using different metrics for movies? Why box office is only one piece of the story? And if our industry is obsessed with box office instead of profitability, box office instead of impact, box office instead of whatever else it is, then we're not allowing for smaller movies to succeed because we're like, well, great for you that you made 2x your budget, but it's not as important as Avatar, which I don't know if it made money or not.
Yeah. One thing I will definitely concede is that what I don't know yet is when you take a movie like an Avatar and you run it, let it have its full theatrical run, which is critical for the survival of the theaters, and then you put it on a streamer and it's got that profile, like what is the value? And maybe Avatar's a bad choice. Like take a movie that didn't do that well, that was kind of a bomb. We just had one, The Bride. The Bride was a very expensive movie and it bombed. The sad end, that great run.
Yeah, well, there
They
you
pushed
go.
it out of last year into
They
this
aren't all
year
gems.
because they knew it was going to be a bomb and they didn't want to disrupt the run.
Flow.
So they put it in this year, it bombs. The value of the theatrical display, I think we can all probably agree that just going straight to streaming with a movie, as David Zaslav actually figured out very early, is a stupid idea. But when you say, okay, we put it out there, we spend a lot to market it, it bombed, what is the boost on the streamer how do you calculate the value? And I don't know I haven't heard a formula for that.
It's because there's not real experimentation or transparency in data. The thing that's interesting that we can see is what happened with Universal today. Universal put out a thesis about, the 30-day, 17-day. And they told the world that their test was working. Now, you can't really test something if you're not testing it against anything. They were testing against their own data and only their own data. But what was interesting was you had Nolan. And Nolan demanded 100 days. And I'm a data person. I look into data religiously, seriously. I take this part of my job, my curiosity very seriously. I wanted to understand if the window had value. And Universal's whole story is that there's this kind of the first 3 weeks of the movies where the movie makes all the money, and they made up a term that it's the decay curve after 3 weeks, and so that's why we have to just shove it into the home. And the funny thing is that's always been the truth, that a movie makes a significant portion of its box office in the first 3 weeks, but between 2017 and 2024, with the shrinking of the window, the percentage in the first 3 weeks is the only metric that stayed pretty consistent. But we lost $1 billion in the tail after the first 3 weeks. After. And what movie that Universal had that made the most money after the first 3 weeks in theaters? Oppenheimer, a movie that from 2017 to 2025. And because everyone knew Oppenheimer had a 100-day window, it was very public. That movie made so much money in that first 3 weeks, but its overall pie was the biggest of any other Universal movie. And they have that data, and they saw that when it dropped on Peacock or whatever later, it still did really well. Consumers don't need to be remarketed to. It's not the DVD era. I like to joke that, if Hot Tub Time Machine 2 marketing didn't hit you the first time, it's not going to hit you again. But if you heard of Hot Tub Time Machine 2, you're going to remember it when it comes back up. The average movie on Netflix's top 10 on any given week is over 7 years old. Consumers are not asking for brand new movies. So what are we doing? They value these movies that had long windows. The average of those windows was over 100 days easily. So why are we devaluing our products? It's not helping anyone.
I don't have an answer. It's a very good question, though. Daniel, do you want to answer? No, this is a very interesting question, and I wanted to kind of pivot a little because we had Megan Delrahim here talking for the first time since Paramount Warner Brother is moving forward. And one thing he mentioned, I was looking at my transcript, he said that they're going to put out 30 movies, that's been said, but it could generate hundreds to thousands of jobs. And I don't understand, but he didn't talk about what those synergies would be. There's supposed to be 6 billion synergies. So I wanted to just, address that kind of elephant in the room and what this deal is going to mean for labor and creative content. I mean, he says he's going to continue to invest, but where do you see the cuts happening?
I think what you said was insane and delusional.
Did anybody laugh? I was going to say, did anybody laugh?
You know, among the many things that he said is that he was going to take, you know, the synergies were going to hit, among other places, in the marketing department. And he also said that the way to really boost the movie-going experience is by having a great marketing campaign. So how do those two things work together? The idea that the back office and the IT department has half the jobs, which is what's going to have to be cut. If you have to bring the leverage down from 6.5, 7, or whatever the heck it is, to 2 in a space of 18 months to 2 years, you're going to have to kill half the company. And by half the company, I mean both of the studios. And there just isn't enough people in duplicative jobs in order to do that. It doesn't make, like, the mathematics don't make sense, especially if you're going to be carrying the cable channels, which, you know, the idea that we're investing in cable channels in 2026 is like we're investing in buggy whip futures. I mean, it's completely insane. Like, I used to, I was an editor in cable television. Every crappy cable network that is out there, I probably worked for at one point. And I don't now, and nobody I know works in cable now. Nobody. If you watch cable right now, you wouldn't know what year it was, because it's all reruns and old movies. And the idea we're going to revitalize cable, you know, that plays on it too. If some of the remaining staff has to go toward, you know, rebuilding VH1, for God's sakes, then, you know, how are you going to get these 30 movies done? It just doesn't make any sense.
No. It makes no sense. I mean, I will say, just on the antitrust thing, I'm not a lawyer, but I actually worked for the Washington Post for several years and covered a lot of legal stuff in my life. And I think Ted Sarandos was entirely right when he said that the Paramount-Warner's merger is a lot more horizontal than a Warner's Netflix deal, because Warner's doesn't have that big machine for distributing films, and they weren't going to take the cable channels because of everything you just said. So Paramount and Warner's have 2 of everything. It's got to be a bloodletting. And the Justice Department will not want to weigh in on that on the record.
Daniel, blink twice if you agree with this.
As Attorney General Bonta said this morning, we do have an active investigation, and we are looking carefully at these issues.
It's very active. I hope it's active. I mean, the Justice Department in Washington obviously is going to do nothing. This is appalling, but we take it as business as usual in this, I'll call it a regime.
The reality is, I think both of these would have been illegal deals. I don't want to let Netflix off the hook. You would have been talking about the #1 and the #3 streamers coming together. It's the same issue, essentially, in terms of bidding. When you're a producer, when you're a writer, when you're a director, there's one less place that you can go to get your movie made, get your television show made. And so I don't actually think there's a ton of difference there. It may be different in terms of what's being connected together, but I think still you still have to give it the same amount of scrutiny.
Well, I am a lawyer, and the dirty truth of the law is that the law is pretend. So things are legal if the judges say they're legal, and they're illegal if the judges say they're illegal. And we make up new law all the time to defend whatever justification there is, right? And so what I am most interested in is, you know, I feel it's pointless to take a position on the Warner transaction, because the transaction is going to happen, right? But what I want is pro-competitive protection going forward. How can we ensure that there's going to be all of these very talented people out of work? People that can make a movie, people that can market a movie theaters that have screens, that need to make sure that they have leverage over those screens. Who is going to help make sure that in this moment, those screens are accessible, that people can make money on their movies? Because when you have this dwindling supply of buyers, it affects everyone unless we can get new buyers, right? So there have to be pro-competitive measures put in place, because it's not the movies that are the reason that there's this consolidation. It's bad business practices. It's
I'm
all this
wondering if
debt.
Daniel could potentially speak in hypotheticals to maybe talk about hypotheticals of say, one studio buying another.
I won't speak in hypotheticals, but I will disagree that I think the law is not made up as we go. We do have principles that we follow.
You mean stare decisis and things like that?
Not just stare decisis, but we have analytical tools in the antitrust context, and we do look to apply them across deals. We also look at history when we look at these deals, and this, as I mentioned, is an area where there have been many deals. We look at incentives and how those change given the deals, and some of the things folks have mentioned, going back to the idea of platforms and how they function as gatekeepers. One of the ways that changes the incentive is that you have an interest to self preference. You have those things change. So when we look at this deal, as we look at any deal, those are issues that we are keeping in mind and looking at closely.
Daniel, in deals of this type, do you look at adjacent markets? Because I mean, you could talk about theaters themselves and whether or not there is a reasonable chance for continued robustness and maybe even survival with lower output. Do you look at adjacent markets like that as in considering a deal like this?
So I don't think I would describe them as adjacent markets. I think they're all potentially relevant markets. And,
Relevant, okay,
they could
fine.
be upstream markets, they could be downstream
Right.
markets.
Okay.
And we do think about how consolidation has effects. The typical horizontal merger analysis looks more at the same market.
Right.
But there have been, AT&T Time Warner was a vertical merger challenge.
Right.
You are looking at changes in incentives, and I think we would look at any relevant market that is
Okay.
affected.
I mean, we have historical precedent, mentioning the AT&T deal. The Trump administration, Trump 1, waved through Disney and Fox, which was pretty freaking horizontal in some ways, and fought AT&T and Warner. Why? Because of CNN, not because the president did not care for CNN. So we have laws that are hypothetical when you don't observe the law. And now what we saw was, of course, the AT&T deal was a mess, so forget about that. What we saw with Disney and Fox disappeared. It's gone. We lost a buyer. We lost all kinds of stuff because Fox is a label, barely, at Disney.
And a dramatic drop in net output.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Is that-
which I think is the
Do you
bigger
think that's
issue for
a
antitrust.
predictive, like
Yes.
100%.
analog to this?
We agree.
Disney
Yes.
promised the theaters that they were going to increase output and protect the window. Do not fight this deal. Was that put in? Was that put in writing? No, it was not. I wonder why. But why on earth? Why on earth would we believe that that's going to be the case here? And also, you can say you're going to protect the theatrical window for how long? Mm-hmm. And are you talking about to theaters? Are you talking about to streaming? Are you going to discount things in the home so much that it makes you stupid to go to a movie theater? And then you just say, oh, look, consumers want the streaming. Well, you gave it to them for free. How are we protecting this business?
We also haven't heard much in this merger about the library issue, right? I mean, we know that Paramount and HBO Max are going to be one streamer. They've announced that. And that's a ton of library that would be at their disposal if they're no longer going to sell it. And, maybe there are almost two ways you can look at that. One way is they're going to need so much goddamn money that they're going to have to sell the library 3 times and triple pledge it to people. But the other way is that they have to, come up with some unique specialness to keep people flocking to Paramount Max or whatever you're going to call it. And either way, I mean, I think the latter way is, it's kind of they're foreclosing the ability for other streamers to use that material, and that's a separate issue.
Well, I was going to play off of what Daniel was starting to talk about and just step back a little. We have a Trump administration and a DOJ that is clearly not pursuing antitrust enforcement right now. And so we have a real vacuum on the federal level, and we see California really stepping up. I mean, Bonta said there could be up to 3 cases they're considering bringing in Tegna, Nexstar Tegna, Live Nation, and Paramount as being the 3, in addition to the state's own case against Amazon. So he didn't promise any. He said all or could be none. So, but that is a very busy schedule for California to take on. And I'm just wanting to see how you observe this trend of states maybe stepping up in lieu of a DOJ to enforce antitrust law.
Yeah, happy to speak to that. I think some of our earlier panelists pointed out that our federal system and our state laws allow for dual enforcers. I think we at the Department of Justice in California and at other attorneys general's offices across the country have a good deal of talent in terms of antitrust enforcers. We often cooperate on cases. We often cooperate also with private parties, which, by the way, are able to challenge mergers under our federal law. So I think, it is a gap that we are aware of, as you heard Attorney General Bonta speak this morning. But I think we are well equipped to step up and step in to backfill, and that is how our system was designed.
There's a huge resource issue, of
Right.
course, with all this. And, I think we've seen in the Ticketmaster case that the states kind of let the federal government take the lead. Federal government had 40 attorneys on the case.
Money.
And now it's, how are we going to fill the gap? Now that the states have hired a terrific private litigator for that, and so hopefully they'll be able to pursue it. But I'm wondering if the legislature in California is considering additional resources. So if all of these cases are going to fall on the shoulders of a handful of states, I think it's something that probably should be considered. And I'm not trying to get you a raise, Daniel, but but you have a lot of work to do,
We need more
frankly.
Daniels, yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, I will say I think our legislature has been taking steps. They did pass recently a merger notification law in
yeah, right.
California that at least gives us, goes into effect next year, but at least gives us, the same filing.
Like a heads up, yeah. Because that's another thing, that the states do not get some of the same information about mergers at the same time as the federal government, and therefore they're kind of playing catch up if they want to file a challenge, especially if the feds just sort of opt out.
Very true.
I mean, there is another branch of government that's not very active right now, but is the Congress, and they
Who?
could pass new antitrust laws and could also fund DOJ more. Not that they're looking to use that right now, but if we're looking towards the midterms or say another administration that maybe a Democratic administration. Do you envision, I mean, we had Amy Klobuchar, leading on ICOA and like some pretty innovative antitrust bills a few years ago. She may no longer be in the Senate come the fall, but do you see that as another pathway? Do you have any hope there, or is it really up to state AGs for now?
I'll talk to you after the beginning of November.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Congress is closed. The moose out front should have told you. But anyway, go ahead.
No, that's it. I mean, everything depends on these midterms, and we see all kinds of efforts to intercede, and if they succeed, we're looking at what we're, no bar holds will be barred. Like they can't bar holds. I mean, I see a lot of Democrats saying, well, why why aren't you Democrats doing something? But obviously, they have no lever.
There is one interesting thing that you can say is the extent to which this is a resonant issue. The fact that 27 states stayed in on the Ticketmaster
Bipartisan.
on a bipartisan basis.
Yes.
Now, look, I mean, that case practically litigates itself. You almost need like
Enron.
just
And
a
then we saw,
recording,
like,
you know,
the
could do that case.
text
But
that released
but the point is that
Enron.
it was important enough to Republicans and Democrats in the states to get that done because they know that the spotlight is on them. And this issue is, I think, going to play, and already is playing a role in a lot of the midterms. And there's a political resonance, obviously, to the Paramount-Warner deal because of, once again, their CNN again. That is a major factor in why I think this has become a top-of-mind issue to certain AGs across the country. And so, you know, it's not just that you're the backstop, it's that it's politically expedient to be the backstop.
David Ellison has said they want to spend more on content creation if this deal goes forward. And, you know, Netflix has committed a lot to spending on content too. I mean, where do you see any opportunity for growth there? Or do you see these consolidations leading to less content? I mean, they're saying 30 new movies, but I mean, I know, Jackie, you're saying this is a real opportunity for independent film right now.
That's what I'm saying. You say growth. How are we defining growth? Because, again, if Netflix is going to buy a bunch of things, what does the profit look like? Can people live on that, right? Is it a viable way to make a living if Netflix is the primary buyer? How Paramount's investing more, does that just mean paying more to friends of theirs to star in movies or direct movies? Or does it mean everyone's sharing in the wealth? Does it mean really robust investment in the labor piece of all of this? I don't know. So what I do know is, like I said, there already are tens of thousands of talented people that are in either out of work or in inconsistent work that have the talent to make movies. There are investors that simply do not believe that the movie business is investable. We need to make sure it's an investable business because these are all entrepreneurial people, right? I represent independent producers. These are entrepreneurs. They have lived through so much. But if there's not a financial model, then you can't make your movies, right? And so, you know, right now, if the financial model means you can't make a movie until you get international buyers to buy your movie rights, and hopefully it's for theatrical, but if they're only buying if there's 10 stars in it and it has to be a genre movie, we're repeating the problem, right? So we need more opportunities for buying, and in order to do that, it needs to be an investable business. So that's where I get back to, how do we ensure that we are setting up a pro-competitive landscape for what comes next?
I mean, that was kind of my last question to wrap up, is like looking ahead 5 years, you know, where do we see the movie industry? Do we have a few mega media companies controlling production distribution? Or, you know, are we seeing more streaming and creating new pathways outside of the studio system? I think both could be true, but where do you think we land?
Well, there's going to be fewer, and there's going to be there's going to be Amazon is in, Apple is in. These are the giant competitors that companies like, you know, Disney or Comcast even are worried about. So the herd will thin, but it will also adding these tech companies coming in. You know, so far one thing I will say is you can burn a lot of money very quickly in Hollywood. Like you can. It's fine to say, we need more movies. It is really hard to make a movie that's good and that people want to go see. So we've seen outside investors. I wrote a whole book about Sony burning a bonfire of money. You know, the Germans came after that. Now we have all these other players. I'm pretty sure, based on what I was told by the late Skip Brittenham, who was an attorney involved in these deals, that Larry Ellison really didn't want anything to do with this because, you know, he'd seen his daughter Megan burn money, and David hadn't done so well either, except when he was kissed in. So he eventually, I think, just decided. I kept checking back with Skip, like, Is he still not going to do it? And for months, Skip would say he wants nothing to do with it. And then it changed. Because why? I think it's because Larry Ellison has one son he knows of, and that son wanted. Or maybe he knows.
With that
I
face,
don't
it's
know.
hard to hide.
And maybe and that's what the son wanted, and he's 80 years old. He was aware he's not going to live forever. So I think finally, reluctantly, kind of talked himself let himself be pulled in. And you saw during the fight between Netflix and Paramount, how Larry just did not want to say, I'm backing this play. And Warner's kept saying, you've got to back the play. And ultimately he caved. But I'm just saying, he knows that this is treacherous and dangerous, and the word existential is being thrown around a lot, and I think that's valid.
I think it's a problematic time, but I think it's long been a problematic time. I mean, we've been waiting for this consolidation wave for about, 5-6 years, basically. Mm-hmm. And now that we're in it, there's this sense of inevitability about it, which I think is wrong. And there's a sense that there's no other alternative. And I think, the fundamental problem, which actually predates the consolidation, is the way in which streaming has allowed the lining up of production and distribution in a way that is corrosive. And I think ultimately, to get back to a system that works and is pro-competitive, you need to separate that production and distribution in some way. And if you don't, you at least need some transparency on how to price these things, as Lee was saying on the last panel, so that creative talent knows exactly how to value their own work. So I think those are the real key drivers of what we're going to see in the next 5 years. But I think this particular case and the political salience of it offers an opportunity to come up with what that looks like, what the next FinCEN or Paramount Decree looks like, and have that be an agenda that people in Washington can talk about and hopefully implement.
And I'll just reiterate that it's true that historically you are burning money to make a movie. It's very, very hard. But like I said before, I think people are not fully appreciating the fact that the fundamentals of theatrical exhibition are completely different now. For the first, all of those VPF deals went away during the pandemic. Going from a $2,000 per screen cost to a $50 per screen cost is not, that is a significant change. And being able to connect immediately, and to be able to actually take loyalty information, there is a new possibility that is completely different. I don't think it makes any sense when we don't have television, we don't have cable anymore. How do you market it is too expensive to make a mid-range movie and have it all released in one time all around the world. That doesn't work, and that's why people pulled out. However, you can make a movie that succeeds at that level. You just have to take advantage of the digital landscape. You have to take advantage of finding your lowest hanging fruit audience and building from there. You do not have to do things the old way. The old way will fail. But we need to be really, really excited about working together on new ways. It's the only way forward. People want to make movies. People want to make money. We need to come up with a new solution.
Just to go back to the question, I will just observe that this is not unique to the Hollywood industry. I think a lot of this comes from the digital revolution and how we have, initially it looked like that would open up a lot of new methods and new opportunities. But as bigger players consolidated, I think the word gatekeeper seems apt. And even in the advertising space, we have cases that are challenging that. So I guess I am bad at predicting the future, but I'm reasonably certain that I know the past, and it has been a pretty clear trend in the last decade that is definitely concerning, both in this space and in many other spaces that affect our lives.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you guys for this great panel. It's really interesting.
Water, I think. Now I'm looking.
Oh, I never.